Welcome to the Clashing of Steel! So there has been a test during this weekend for ranked mode in Total War Arena. And as it was to be expected, I took part in it, and my honest opinion is somewhere between the two. It has a bit of good, it has a bit of bad. It's far from perfect, but it isn't a total loss. So the first big problem I feared was the size of the map and the number of team members. 5 members on both teams. So your role is about 20% of your team's performance. A big fear was that we might be stretched to 10. There are so many roads to go and so many areas we need to defend. But this didn't seem to be the problem. Players tried to work with each other, tried to be near each other, tried to do something more than just spread themselves thin. Although there were several who tried to sneak through from the side or do something similar to that, it is counterable because we do have the same number of troops. One of the second biggest fears I had with this big size of the map was that the base capture might become an aggressive tactic of certain unit types or certain players. And so far I haven't seen many players going for the cap. The big maps shouldn't matter, because you move with your team in Unity, you try to work. It might not always work with your team members might not know what to do, you might fail yourself, there are several different factors. But it is rather important that you shouldn't waste your units. All 3 of your units are 20% of your team, so you have a lot of weight on your shoulders. Mistakes can often mean victory or defeat. Since the map size isn't a problem, especially when we compare that both teams have same amount of troops, they can both be invaluable. What can be the problem? The answer can be quite simple. Take a look at the composition of both of our teams. We have spearmen, horsemen, elephants, archers, but the opponents have swordsmen and archers. Elephants can be hard to counter, especially with Germanicus in a game you are forced to fight against other infantry. Germanicus can somewhat counter elephants, but he can't do it while he is forced to engage with other infantry. So that gave us the clear advantage in this map. Plus, considering that they have no horsemen, they have no mobility to go around us, and we have especially 2 players who have horsemen, can easily take down the opposing archers who are roaming about. The elephants are one simple example how we had the advantage. There are many other compositions like where one team has elephants and javelins at the same time while opponents only have archers. There were many of these unit types and other small factors that overall changed the game. Here this was simple, we had the elephants, we had the advantage, opponents didn't have any heavy counters against elephants. So in this match I'm playing catapults and you can already see the painful team compositions. The elephants should cancel each other out, but the big problem is that opponents have a lot of horsemen and we have a lot of ranged units. Basically, we should be an easy target for them. They can easily swarm us, surround us, destroy us. Just with the sheer number of horsemen and a bit force from the swordsmen. All of it would have not been that bad if we only would have had proper defensive positions. There are a lot of different factors, and the only reason we won this match was because of the opposing horsemen's greed. Perhaps even proper unawareness of how the units work. As you can see, the Scipio had Oath of Preservance on, which he actually didn't need. This right here is a place where you think they would take us. Horsemen would try to flank us, swordsmen would try to come from the front, and archers would try to shoot at us. As it partially happens so, they kinda give up rather quickly. Why would they even try against the spearmen? That is a weird situation. They basically attacked too early and suffered some losses because of it. But this is where things are gonna get out of hand. We do have archers alive for some unknown reason. We have elephant alive. And I have my spearmen who are trying to make as much difference as they can. Right now I'm just timing my silence and I hope it kinda worked. But right now, this is the moment when the horsemen should have attacked. It would have been confusing for me, it would have been hard for me to defend. But looking at this, I can already say that this player shouldn't be playing Horsemen. They don't have the patience for it. They could have easily just waited around us, they could have poked us, forced us, and tried to react to different fronts at the same time. Instead, they were looking for an easy kill, as it is often in many of the regular battles. And usually, easy kills come with proper patience and teamwork. You need to wait for that moment, and you need to wait for your team to create you that moment. Impatience is one of the biggest problems with cavalry players, and here in this ranked mode match, this is just an easy example. They had a team composition that could have easily annihilated us, but instead they went greedy, they went for the score. This ranked mode, this isn't the place where you want to go for the score, but for the victory. And usually, seeing how these matches have worked out for me, I say that victory comes through annihilating most of your opponents. There were many other battles like this, where there weren't any elephants at all, but one side had the catapult, and the other side had archers instead. So the big problem I see is team balancing, or perhaps even setting up your teams. That is one of the main big problems. But another one is commanders and unit types. I played with Vercingetorix especially, to see if I could make any difference with Scorched Earth. That is an excellent ability. It can work wonders, it can be incredible. Unfortunately, I failed here with Scorched Earth. I thought my team member would seal off their entrance, and that actually costs me this specific location. I was expecting for him to get close and then like seal off the side, but instead he just stood there trying to flank the other guy, which was unnecessary. The big problem with playing Vercingetorix with infantry like this is that Scorched Earth can often be walked out of, and these infantry in general, the barbarian infantry, don't have much in the form of missile block. Although they do block missiles better than the Falksmen, they often still suffer. Only thing they have going for them is the mobility, and perhaps that would even be better with Arminius, but I just like to be able to deal with the heavy opponents. So these javelins, well, they do heavy damage to basically everybody. But there was even a match where I was facing against Ambiorix, and those missiles from the front, they were very deadly. We can also take a look at the team composition here. We had somewhat excellent unit types to deal with these ranged opponents. They have javelins, light artillery, slingers and swordsmen. We have javelins, swordsmen, horsemen and catapults. This composition often plays a big role. I have had many of these composition matches, which basically means if you have catapult and elephants and opponents have no counters for them, you can easily win the match. That is a big problem in this matchmaking. And the second part is certain generals. Although here I'm able to make Vercingetorix work, to some extent at least, there are gonna be some generals like Hannibal who I tried out, who wasn't as good as one would think. Hannibal would only be reasonable if played with full 3 elephant units. Basically, I think barbarian units will suffer the most in ranked matches. They have light, agile flanking units, but they will be no use if they are easily countered. By that, I mean if they are noticed and if they are focused. They can easily be taken down because their defenses aren't comparable to many other units. Probably the second worst infantry that will be in ranked matches would be the Carthage infantry, because both of their spear and swordsmen are somewhat light. Their swordsmen are in some cases near equal to barbarians. Although Hannibal can probably still flip it with Ad Portas and Determination, still the overall unit's defense isn't as good as the Romans. Although Romans don't have mobility, you just need often enough force, so you might as well play Sulla or Germanicus. Perhaps Germanicus is even somewhat better, seeing as the missile block can be invaluable. And if you want to be mobile with the spearmen, you might as well pick Meltiades. There are going to be these certain unit types and commanders that will outshine others. This match that is going on here right now, here we simply win because of the catapult. That is the simple reason. We use or ask the horseman to scout for us. He did, and catapult can now just weaken the opponents. Although the horseman could have spread a bit more. So the biggest problems are matchmaking. How is your team balanced? What units do you have? The big part of matchmaking is that often in these matches the composition of teams is so ridiculous. One team gets ranged units, a lot of them, and the other team gets horsemen. One team gets the elephants and their counters, and the other team gets just the archers. Also commanders and faction units, some that will underperform in ranked matches. They won't be the strongest, they might be inferior, and so why should you handicap yourself? Perhaps in the end this can be somewhat of a good thing. When units are underperforming in comparison to other units, perhaps they will get reworked and a bit boosted to increase their effectiveness, to make them more viable. Because I would not like to see only Germanicus players, let's say Sulla, Leonidas, Miltiades, Ambiorix, Scipio. I wouldn't like to see these mainstream strong commanders all the time. I would like to see some variety. But I fear that the variety is gonna be secondary because some of the commanders will just outperform others. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but seeing how well some of these commanders can outperform others, I would like the cap to be somewhat smaller. Like I did the comparison between Germanicus and Hannibal. Of course Germanicus won that, and neither were the Carthage or the Rome sword infantry comparable to each other. But the main good part was that the map, or the map size, didn't make your units or your friendly troops spread too thin. Players still tried to be close to each other and work together, or at least to some extent. Some matches could still seem ridiculous, especially where there were a total of 3 ranged units in your team, catapult and 2 archers, and then the rest of your team was 1 player with the swordsman and 1 player with the elephants. But the matches I hated the most had the ridiculous amount of ranged units and not enough infantry troops to defend them. Even when I was playing as Leonidas, I had to defend javelins and archers. And the best part is opponents had slingers. And the other best part about that is that the javelins and archers were queuing together. 2-man pre-made of ranged units. Why won't just one of you pick spearmen or swordsmen or anything? There were good matches, there were ridiculous matches, and then there were just the retarded matches. And actually there seemed to be so many of those retarded matches because team compositions were just ridiculous. It was painful to watch how single dominating units like the elephants or catapults on one team could just bring an easy victory. Let's compare the percentages of 10 and 5 player teams. When you have 3 players who are playing ranged units, that is 60% of your team. If that would happen in 10 versus 10 player matches, you already know that that is out of hand, that would be lost. And similar things happened here so many times. If we pull comparisons from 10 and 5 player teams, we get pretty much the same conclusion. Those 2 players of archers, that is the 40% of your team. That is a huge percentage, that is a huge number. I know that many players would love this variety, but I think the main focus should be on the infantry. Yes, there needs to be ranged units, but just pushing them into it, just a bunch of ranged units, that will make the matches just unbearable, just nasty. I know I'm pulling a lot of comparisons from 10 player teams, but I'm trying to pull the percentage comparisons. The best matches I usually have when I'm playing ranged units or infantry or horsemen are in a team that has maybe 20 to 30% ranged units, 20 to 30% horsemen, 10% usually of the artillery swords, maybe 10% of elephants, and the rest would be infantry, sword or spearmen. Those are the matches where I usually perform well, where I can perform with any unit type reasonably. Then there are matches where there are ton of horsemen or a ton of ranged units. There aren't so many of them in 10 vs 10, but every now and then you're probably going to stumble into one. As I played Spearmen several matches, I didn't like the composition of me being the only infantry and my team having a total of 2 or 3 ranged units that I needed to defend, and the elephants or horsemen who try to do their own thing. I know it is all behind teamwork, but there are also these ridiculous combinations that are set against each other, which makes it hard for one team to counter other. As I said, some of it is stuck behind teamwork or behind the skill, but if your matchmaking doesn't give you any remorse, what else is there for you to do? Around 30 to 40% of matches I played were reasonably balanced. I'm not saying they were perfectly balanced, but the proportions of the team made it seem like both teams had reasonable chances. So this was my first opinion on the ranked matches. It wasn't totally horrible, but there were many different aspects that I feel should be looked at. I'm of course gonna play more of it. Hopefully I won't get as disappointed as I did yesterday. Because of people, of course. Yeah. And hopefully as I progress, the tactics and teamwork and matchmaking will get better. Anyways, don't forget to subscribe and thanks for watching.